I'm Josh Schneiderweiler, coming up on Football Today.
Firmino to take on Holgate and to skip past him and to pull it back. It's 5! And it's the number 5 who's made it that way. Gini Wijnaldum wraps things up once and for all for Liverpool. And maybe wraps up his time in charge at Everton.
Losers last night in the Merseyside derby by 5 goals to 2, and they sit 18th right now in the Premier League table. So Everton have sacked Marco Silva, and last night's defeat to Liverpool means Everton, as you can see, have dropped into the bottom 3.
In December, Everton were in the relegation zone and watching their season evaporate into thin air. Now they sit in 11th place, just 5 points off 5th, with a chance at Champions League football. You can trace much of that success back to Carlo Ancelotti's appointment as manager. Since he took over, the club have the 3rd most points in the league and have been displaying a brand new attacking verve.
Taking on Van Aanholt on the outside. What a wonderful goal from Bernard. Great delivery at the end of an excellent Everton passing move.
Today we ask, how has Carlo Ancelotti rejuvenated Everton? Right now, it's a couple hours before the Everton kickoff against Arsenal, and I'm joined by David Hughes, who is a football scouting and analysis writer for Reach PLC. David, before we talk about Ancelotti, what went wrong for Marco Silva at Everton?
Last season, they finished 8th in a rather beige campaign. There was some good moments, but also a fair few bad. On the whole, there seemed to be good foundations for what he was trying to do, so that 8th placed finish kind of felt as though it was something to build upon. And then this season, they had a fairly kind start to the season, on paper at least. But after 8 games, they were in and around the bottom 3. And there was just too many of the issues that we saw last season, this season. There was a reoccurrence to conceding really soft goals from set pieces. There was a lack of cohesion in attack. Some real kind of, I suppose you'd call it, tactical rigidity. He seemed to stick a lot with a 4-2-3-1. And there was very little in the way of adaptation for opponents they were facing. You almost always knew who was going to be in starting 11, how they were going to play, style of attack, how they would defend, and I think this at the end made them very easy to overcome.
And so then Everton fired Marco Silva on December 4th following a quite terrible 5-2 loss to rivals Liverpool. And so at this point, after he is sacked, they've had 3 managers since May of 2016 in Ronald Koeman, Sam Allardyce, and as we've mentioned, Marco Silva. Is there any pattern to how they've approached hiring managers in that time?
If you look at Koeman and Marco Silva, it felt as though Everton were trying to install managers who were fairly early on into their career, youngish, and maybe looking to lay down a legacy and build a name for themselves, along with progressing Everton up the table and competing for trophies again. But it just didn't work. And Farhad Moshiri, Everton's owner, since stated that Everton are one of the most difficult clubs to manage in England because the expectations are so high. And this means there's very little in the way of trial and error room, really. So 1 or 2 bad results can mount the pressure on straight away. And Moshiri said one of the main reasons he's brought in Ancelotti was he believed that a more experienced coach could deal with that pressure a lot better. So I think that's why we saw a little bit of a change in direction in terms of the recruitment of Ancelotti, because if we remember, Arteta was obviously looked to be available at the time as well. Everton and Arsenal both seemed to be looking at Ancelotti and Arteta between them, and they've gone with the Arteta route and Everton went with the Ancelotti. And I think it was that experience that was the decisive factor for Everton.
Well, this wasn't the first time that he was rumored to be going to Everton, right?
No, that's correct, yeah. So it was back in 2017. Moshiri made a move for Ancelotti shortly after he left Bayern Munich. Ancelotti said at the time that he was just, he wanted a break from the game.
The suggestion in some quarters was that Ancelotti wanted a clean slate, a summer transfer window, lots of money to spend, and former Swansea manager Paul Clement as his assistant.
I think there is two key differences between now and the attempt to bring him in 2017. I think one was back then, Mashiri, I believed, was very much more focused on a Hollywood name coming in at Everton.
I think for our club to compete in northwest of England, which is the new Hollywood of football, with Guardiola, Mourinho, Klopp, and we needed a star to stand on the touchline. So we got Koeman.
Someone that really took all the headlines and put them on the map and so on. This time round, I do believe that he saw Ancelotti as somebody who's perfect in terms of having the experience to deal with basically anything that the game can throw up. He's been around for so long now. I do believe he sees Ancelotti as the guy who can just not only steady the ship but also take them forward. As I say again, I believe that's why he's chose to go with him over, say, an Arteta character who has all the credentials to do well but has a lot to learn.
Well, Ancelotti, I wouldn't say he failed at Napoli, but he definitely didn't succeed in achieving his goals. And he has a big resume, and it seems like he's trying to kind of recapture some of his previous glory and success, just like Everton are as a club.
Definitely, yeah. Look, if we're being honest, we know Ancelotti is probably more on the way down in terms of his career path. He's been at the very best of the best. He's won everything. By joining Everton, of course, it is, no doubt about it, it's a step down, but it can certainly be somewhere where he can be successful, and Everton need success. Nobody believed that they could land the manager, and I think from the Ancelotti point of view, to him, I believe Everton looked like a project.
The attraction is the tradition, the history of the club. It's one of the biggest team in Italy, in England. It's true that I manage a top team. That is also true, for example, when I was in Paris Saint-Germain, the project was really good there, and that attracted me. So the ambition of the club, and I think here is the same.
A club that has been very successful in the past. They haven't been for a very long time, but there's good foundations in place. There's a decent side in place. And I believe if he could come in and get Everton back into the Champions League, win a few trophies along the way, then that would be huge for his CV. That would be, obviously, he couldn't compete with the likes of his Champions League successes, but to go into a club that wasn't perceived as a ready-made super club and make them competitive, I think that would be huge for him and his own personal honour.
Well, we've discussed about the importance of Everton fans in hiring a manager and how they can kind of turn on a manager quite quickly. It seems like he's already kind of won over the fans there, and in fact, they already kind of have a song for him.
Ancelotti's come in and he's an appointment that fans can be proud of, excited about. And what he's done is, it feels like he has aligned the club from top to bottom, so from the board right the way down to the fans. I think any top side needs to be aligned in that manner. It reminds me a little bit, and I'm reluctant to say, but reminds me a little bit of when Klopp went into Liverpool and it seemed to galvanise the whole fan base because of the character he is. Now, Ancelotti and Klopp are very different in terms of characters, but there does seem to be that same sort of galvanisation to the fans and the club, and it just this whole, I don't know, breath of fresh air being around and lifting the whole of Goodison Park.
In his first 8 games, Ancelotti has accrued 17 points for the club. How has he changed the team to get that successful?
It's funny with Ancelotti. So he's not really the type of manager that comes into a club and makes, sweeping, bold changes. I think it's Claudio Ranieri who's famously nicknamed the Tinkerman, but I think in truth you could say the same about Ancelotti. If we look at Everton, Silva left and they put Duncan Ferguson as interim manager. Now Ferguson installed a fairly basic 4-4-2 formation. with the idea of just simply getting Everton back to basics, working hard and trying to grind out a few results. And Ancelotti's coming in and really stuck with that formation. Now, he has previous use in a 4-4-2, but I think it just makes that transition for the players a lot easier. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's definitely been some variations on his 4-4-2 compared to Ferguson's. There's more ambition in attack. They do seem more solid defensively, and there's definitely more cohesion in terms of the transitions. But I think that ability just kind of come in and make subtle changes where changes needed to be made, but not almost wiping the board and starting again, has been really important in Everton just continuing the good spell they had under Ferguson.
So he's changed the formation, but let's get a little bit more specific.
We've seen more variety in the attacks. It felt like under Marco Silva, they were very one-dimensional, shall we say. The build-up play often seemed to be a ball through the middle and then out wide to Luca Dean, who'd be overlapping, who'd then try and put a cross into the box. Everton had I think it was the second or third most crosses attempted last season, and it was quite similar this season. But now there just seems to be just more variance in how Everton are going forward. So we're seeing more forward passes, we're seeing more direct play. And what I found was really interesting, and I actually only noticed this on this weekend, doing a bit of research ahead of their game against Arsenal, was there's been a drop in terms of Everton's passes completed within the 20 yards of the opposition goal. And there's also been a noticeable drop in terms of their pressing numbers, both since Ancelotti come in. Now, another side who tend to hover around the bottom half in both those departments is Wolves. And we know Wolves tend to, sit deep, hit you fast on the counter. And based on that evidence, there's an indication that Everton are also sitting a little bit deeper, keeping more structure, more difficult to break down. But then they're attacking fast when they do win the ball back and creating chances fairly quick with fast balls forward. So I think that's quite interesting.
You mentioned this vertical passing game that's kind of changed under him. Can you give any examples of that?
Yeah. So a player that's really assisted in this regard is Bernard. Bernard was being used really as an out-and-out winger since he arrived at Everton last summer from Shakhtar. On the left side he played, but since Ancelotti's come in, he's been utilised a lot more to drift into central areas. That's the space really in between the defence and midfield. And he'll often come into that area in the half spaces and make himself available to direct balls forward. And then he's great at turning and driving towards goal. I think that's assisted. And just on the whole, Everton just seem to be focusing more on forward balls. And it's something Ancelotti touched on when he arrived. I haven't got the exact quotes to hand, but it was something along the lines of after one of the early games in charge that Everton were focusing too much on balls going backwards. They weren't moving the ball fast enough, so they weren't exposing spaces within the opposition setup. Since then, we've seen an increase in forward passes per 90 minutes. And I think a really good goal, if we're looking for an example of the same, would be Calvert-Lewin's versus Newcastle at Goodison. Luca Dean picks up the ball halfway in the Newcastle half, and Bernard's making a run out to the left on this occasion. Traditionally, you'd expect Everton to play that ball out wide to Bernard, who'll then look to swing in the cross. But Dean lifts his head up and spots Calvert-Lewin hovering just on the edge of the 18-yard box, and he fizzes in a great forward ball into the box, allowing Calvert-Lewin to turn and will apply a superb finish.
Moise Keane with the layoff. Luca Dean. Calvert-Lewin, brilliantly done. It had goal written all over it. And Calvert-Lewin strikes again against Newcastle.
I don't think last season we would have saw Everton score that goal, or maybe even under Silva this season. It was just an example of being a lot more direct and maybe focusing less on possession and more about getting the ball forward and trying to convert chances.
And if he keeps scoring the way he is, which is the question mark people have had over him, then he's pushing himself into this England squad, because we don't.
You mentioned Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and he's kind of had a resurgence under Ancelotti. In his 8 games with Ancelotti, he has 6 goals and 1 assist. How is he being used differently, or why have we seen such a resurgence from him?
I always think Calvert-Lewin has been a good striker. He's always had the credentials to go and be a good striker, but he just perhaps hasn't been getting enough quality chances created for them. Last season he scored, I'm going to say, around 6 league goals. It was there or thereabouts, and that was off an expected goal total of 6.1. So he's basically scoring the chances that he should have been scoring, but Everton just weren't creating enough quality chances for them. Since Ancelotti's come in, he's been in a forward 2 with Richarlison, both of which have really enjoyed that partnership. They're playing really well together. And Everton have just been creating a lot better quality chances since Ancelotti's come in. If you look at his XG per 90 before Ancelotti arrived, it was 0.43 per 90. Since then, it's rose to 0.85.
So it's nearly doubled.
Yeah, nearly doubled, exactly. If you have a look at the shot map between both sample periods, you can see Calvert-Lewin was getting left with a lot of chances from difficult areas, closer to the edge of the 18-yard box. But since Ancelotti's come in, we're seeing more chances middle of the goal, near the 6-yard box. And this all makes a huge difference in the striker's ability to convert. And as I said, the abilities of the team, or the improving abilities of the team, are having a positive impact on Calvert-Lewin. I think he's finally getting the recognition he deserves, because away from the goals, he's been an important player for Everton for a while now. He's great at running in behind, he's strong, he's good in the air. He's got all the makings of a great forward. It was just he didn't have the goal tally to show, and now we're starting to see the goals with better chances being created for him.
Something you highlighted earlier was Marco Silva's ineptitude with set pieces and his struggles with them. How have Everton changed that with Ancelotti?
So before even Ancelotti arrived, Ferguson basically did away with Everton's zonal marking system that Silva did install. And it's probably for the best, because ever since he brought it in, they've struggled with it. Without going into the granular details of it, it seemed to leave them quite exposed near the back post. If anybody ever wants to go on to my Twitter at @Hughes_, there is various threads where I looked at it in more detail, but yeah, there seemed to be a fragility at the back post that was often exploited, and they conceded the most set piece goals last season. They were on the way to doing the same again this season, and that was one of the biggest problems we saw under Silva. Ancelotti's come in, he's gone back to a zonal marking system. However, there is subtle adjustments to the same, which sums him up really, that are just making it a lot more reliable, a lot stronger. Players have adapted to it much better, and it just means that Everton are a lot more solid from set pieces.
And they're also scoring them as well. You did a recent piece and highlighted the fact that Yerry Mina, who obviously scored a couple goals in the World Cup.
Quadrado takes, and Mina scores! Colombia save themselves at the last! Their carnival goes on! And we are headed for extra time!
Has been much better on corner kicks and set pieces, and he's actually second in the team in expected goals per game now.
Yeah, that's correct. So Yerry Mina was a strange one where he... it might surprise a few people to know that in terms of Europe's top 5 divisions, there's only 3 players who have had more headed shots than him this season. Now, he finally scored his first 2 league goals against Watford a couple of weeks ago.
Into the 4th minute of stoppage time now at the end of this half, and there's Yerry Mina again, and Everton are level. It's Mina at the double.
You've just touched on his increase in XG, and that's down to better set-piece routines and Luka Deem creating better, or putting in better balls for him. And I just want to touch on the set-piece routines because it's something that I've picked up on recently. If you want to see a good example of it, although this wasn't Yerry Mina's goal, it was one for Calvert-Lewin. West Ham away a few weeks ago, there's a corner ball that comes in and Mason Holgate makes a dart and run to the near post to then flick the ball on to Calvert-Lewin, who obviously is then in the second phase of the corner and can head it in.
It's Luka Dean to the near post, it's a flick, it's Calvert-Lewin! Everton respond within a matter of 3 minutes.
Great flick on from Holgate. Looks like one off the training ground now. Calvert-Lewin times his run to perfection.
If you just watch Everton from corners now, they're just doing things differently. They're mixing things up, players are making different runs into different areas. And for a long time, I've talked about the importance of making set pieces count, because over the course of a campaign, they are the marginal gains that you can have over your opponents.
You know, I want to switch gears a little bit. I thought that the 3-2 win against Watford a couple weeks ago, where they were down 2-1, showed how Ancelotti has really changed this team and the culture of this team. It feels like those comebacks didn't really happen under Silva.
Well, you're right, they didn't. In this whole time as Everton manager, Marco Silva's side didn't come back from a losing position in the league, which tells you a story in itself. So it kind of felt like Everton needed to score first if they wanted to win, or they'd be in trouble. But yeah, I was really impressed by the Watford win, because they go down to 10 men. They were 2-0 down. They pull it back 2-2 through, ironically, 2 set-piece goals. Again, highlighting how important they are. And then, yeah, after they go down to 10 men, often you'd see sides shut up shop and hold out for the draw. Now, don't get me wrong, Ancelotti made some tactical substitutions in terms of solidifying the side, but at no point watching the game did it feel like they basically give up on trying to nick the game. And I think if you look back on that third goal that they scored later on, it highlights maybe what you're referring to in terms of a change of mentality.
But now it's Everton on the break with Richarlison, and he's got Keane and Walcott in support. Has Richarlison locked it too long? No, he hasn't. Keane is there. Can Walcott reach it? Yes, he can.
Now, not only was Moise Keane up with Richarlison, but also Theo Walcott. And Moise Keane actually fluffs his effort initially, but that Walcott is then following up behind to obviously convert the chance. And you'd have to say, if there wasn't 3 Everton attackers breaking away there, you're not going to score that goal. Even if it was just 2, you know, Keane would have missed the chance and it would have led to nothing. But it shows real ambition that Everton were prepared to, even though they were down to 10 men, prepared to break in those numbers, and they obviously rewarded with the goal and the 3 points. And I have to say, I do think a lot of that comes down to the manager.
Yeah, just that like change in confidence or calmness that has kind of permeated the team a bit.
Yeah, definitely. That's it. There does seem to be a lot more calmness, belief, and ambition to go and win games. You know, it does help as well that there isn't meltdowns after bad moments, because there has been some bad moments even already under Ancelotti. There was the defeat to Liverpool where they played really a second or third string side in the FA Cup. And then there was where Everton were 2-0 up in the 91st minute and drew 2-2 with Newcastle after conceding 2 late goals. But it just helps that you touch on the calmness and that you just mentioned there, that after that game there was no major, post-mortem or collapse. Ancelotti just said, this is football, these things happen, move on from it, learn from it.
We played really well, we deserve to win, but you have to accept the result, because sometimes in football there happened things that you cannot control.
Everton just kind of picked themselves up and dusted themselves down fairly quickly, and it's good signs for the future.
So by the time this has been listened to, Everton will have played Arsenal. They then play Manchester United, Chelsea, and Liverpool in their upcoming games. How sustainable is the success that they've had going forward? And could they make the Champions League?
So, it sounds negative, but for me, I think the Champions League may just evade them this season. I know the 5th place has opened it up, but there's a lot of teams fighting to get into the top 5, and I think there's a lot of variables that can impact it. Everton have left themselves, even though they're only, I think it may be only at the time recording 5 points off a Champions League spot. But as you said, there's some tough games coming up, and when there's a lot of sides in and around there, it's hard to overtake so many. So I think they may struggle for Champions League, but I do certainly think the Europa League's an option. And look, nobody would have, they were in the relegation zone in December. If they can finish in any European position this season, then that'll be huge. I do think the success is going to be sustainable. I've had a look at some of the underlying numbers whilst being performed over the last few weeks, and they fully match up to what Everton are doing on the pitch. It's not like we're expecting to see some huge drop-off. It'll be interesting to see how after the next few weeks when they've played some of the tougher sides in the division. But as I said, it doesn't look like there's going to be any huge drop-off in form, and I think they're definitely going to be there or thereabouts come the end of the season.
David Hughes is a football scouting and analysis writer for Reach plc and regularly writes about Everton and Liverpool. The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.